does the startup world have room for corporate thinking, right? So I don't know how many of you have seen this movie, The Intern. All of you familiar with the movie, The Intern? So there, Jules Austin is Anne Hathaway is Jules Austin, and Robert De Niro is Ben Whittaker. So Jules Austin is like the startup founder struggling to find order in chaos, and she's trying to do a lot of things. And actually, in the movie, the mandate is that she's trying to. She's been told that she has to get a very corporate guy as a CEO, right? And she's going through a lot of people. And Ben Whittaker comes in as this 70-year-old guy who is bringing in that kind of steadiness and structure and intro to this whole thing, right? And interestingly, what happens is that in the movie, she ends up not taking a CEO, but ends up running her own company. But now she is a little more calmer and clearer of how things are, right? So that's essentially what we are looking at in this thing, right? Should startups be bringing in corporate thinking, and would that be at the cost of the entrepreneurial spirit, right, or not? And if it is not, when would you want to kind of these things, right? So sometime back in Excel, we had an entrepreneur who came down, and he runs this Buddy for Study. It's an interesting concept of scholarships for students, and he likened the journey of a startup like this, right? So he said the 0 to 1 phase, he likened it to the avatar of Parashurama. Just like, I'm angry young man, I'm going and bashing and doing things on my own and so on. And then this 1 to 10 is like that of Rama, who's kind of leading and having a team and so on. And then the 10 to 100 plus is kind of the Krishna, who is like, I am sitting back and giving direction kind of thing, right? So if was this journey, in your mind, at what stage do you think is it right for a startup to think of having a kind of a corporate intervention, in either by way of a structure or by way of somebody coming in, right? So when do you think that works? And first of all, do you think it is necessary? Then when do you think it works?
So when the startup is very early trying to figure out their first MVP or trying to go to the market, I think there is no need for a corporate mindset. It is only going to slow things down. Once you have got to a product market fit, you have maybe few early contracts out and all those things. You can maybe start thinking of putting structures around it. Maybe not all corporate structures or that the whole hierarchy, but at least start thinking about those things. In the early stages, I think even when you're like going to the customer, which might be a big corporate, they don't want to discuss with other corporates. The reason they're discussing with you is because you are innovating and doing that. So there is no, so that's there. Also, I think it will definitely depend on an industry-based thing focus also. But primarily, I think once you have actually validated that the product works, you have early customers coming in, you're scaling at that stage, then the structure and all would be better to put in.
Do you think that, so if and when, like what he's saying, doing that, will that end up in becoming a little too rigid and losing the original whatever?
I spent 13 years in a blue chip corporate, the world's most technologically advanced company, which is 30 plus years old. And the last 10 years I've been in, wrestling with startup, kind of thinking. Right? So my own feeling is that in a startup, you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Yes, startups are about evolving, are about solving problems, are about making mistakes, all of that. But startups are also very vulnerable because they haven't sometimes set up right structures, and you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Governance structures, you can build it up right from the get-go without any significant amount of cost. So not everything is about cost. Something is about philosophies also. And when you are, evolving a startups, maybe you don't think about these things very deeply, or you don't think about the importance of, certain kinds of things like this, right? Maybe, you have figured out a solution to a problem, and you put in place mechanisms for it to be continued. But if you don't create a durable process, which is the corporate thinking, you will end up solving the same problem 6 months down the line, because whatever you put is going to break, and then you're again on the hamster wheel, going back to the same thing and trying to fix. A lot of this happens in the startups, right? So, we use the cliche that don't make the same mistake twice. You make new mistakes, right? But how do you make new mistakes? Only whatever mistakes you've made remain fixed forever, right? So that's when you are able to make new mistakes and learn new things. That's the whole intent of a startup. So I think definitely there is a case for, like he mentioned, I mean, you don't have to do an overkill, but that also comes with a little bit of the maturity of what kind of risk and what's the trade-off between risk management and opportunity maximization. So at what stage you want to play what role. But definitely there is a case to introduce, certain kind of frameworks, certain level of stability, certain processes which make things durable, collaborative methodologies which make sure you're communicating the same thing across the place, and also installation of processes, that the machinery that will keep running so that you can move on to the next big phase. But yeah, doing a lot of these very early on also is going to kill the creative juices of the company, right? So you want to, it's a little bit of a judgment call, I would say, that what stage you introduce, but you have no other choice but to introduce. Eventually all startups becomes large corporates. So how do you make sure when they become large corporate also they are agile and they don't die because they didn't think about all these processes the right way in the beginning?
So do you think, see, people like him who spent a substantial career in a structured environment, do you feel, I should have asked this question to you, but do you feel that when you get into the startup world, it can be like feet on hot water kind of a thing? Do you feel there will be a lot of time that will take for them to get used to it? That is also going to play a role in how the eventual expectations are getting met, right? Somebody coming in for a particular reason, them delivering will also depend on how comfortable they are with this situation.
Yeah, so completely, and I've had a similar experience, right? First part of my career, like V1 of me was large companies, V2 was doing startups and creating my own. I think, so yeah, you take a person who's been in a corporate environment, move them into a startup, 90% of the time they'll fail, unless A, you've created an environment which makes them successful, and B, you've chosen the person very, very carefully. Also the timing from your own standpoint, right? And I think one of the things that we don't talk enough or often about is this notion of emotional intelligence, and we don't teach it, right? And as a founder of a company or involved in startups, right, you've got to have that emotional intelligence to every time figure out, am I the right person to do this today? Because there is a personality, there is a vanity, people will chase you, and and so that plays over, right? You start thinking, hey, I'm king of the world, but are you still the right person to lead it? And that will only happen if you're smart enough to think like that, to have that emotional intelligence to know that, hey, I may not be the right people. And there are enough examples of companies where startups have, decided, hey, this is something else, this area I don't understand, let me bring in a professional manager and they can lead it from here. There is no doubt in my mind, 0 to 1 journey, you can't, right? You can't have corporate structure, like it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, once you are on the path to becoming successful, I think it's really your own having that awareness of what am I good at, what am I not good at, what is required for me in the next 2 to 3 years, and then bringing on the right set of talent, resource, process to bridge that gap. And at some point, it might also be that, hey, I shouldn't be a part of this company. It's a tough decision to make, but it's a decision you've got to make. And people often have this, and startup founders often have this like my baby thing, right? And hopefully that's going. The first employee you've hired is no longer your baby. It's a myth. The first time you've taken the money, now you're beholden to the investors. So you're no longer, like, unless you've not taken money, you're still fine because you've put in money from your own pocket. The first time you take money, that's it. You're done. You have to now give a return. You have to give a return to the employees who took the risk with you. And so you have to, you're working for them now, right, essentially. So I think having that sort of understanding is very important according to me.